Welcome to What If Sleepstorian, where the boundaries between worlds dissolve and beloved characters step beyond the pages of their original tales. Here, in the hushed hours between day and night, a legendary swordsman might cross paths with a malevolent demon, a wanderer's blade could meet the weight of ancient wisdom, and the impossible becomes beautifully inevitable. Each story begins with a simple question, what if, and unfolds into a gentle tapestry of intrigue, wonder, and dreams. Tonight, we begin with something a little melancholic, a tale woven from the shadows of ancient Japan, where the air hums with the weight of unspoken truths and the flicker of lantern light dances on the edge of the unknown. If these stories bring you comfort or spark your imagination, I'd be grateful if you'd like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. So dim the lights, find your most comfortable position, and let these whispered narratives carry you softly towards sleep. The air was thick with the scent of cedar and damp earth, a heavy, living breath that curled around the senses like a memory you could almost touch. This was Japan in the early 17th century, the dawn of the Edo period, a time when the shogunate's laws were just beginning to carve order from the chaos of warring clans. But here, in the remote wilderness of a mountain valley, those distant decrees felt like whispers from another world. The forest was a cathedral of towering pines and gnarled oaks, their branches woven together to form a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft, dappled glow. The ground was a carpet of moss and fallen leaves, yielding underfoot, each step releasing a faint, musky scent of decay and life intertwined. The distant call of a crane pierced the silence, its mournful note swallowed by the vastness of the trees, while the air carried the sharp tang of pine sap and the faint, bitter edge of coming rain. This wasn't the Japan of polished courts or bustling merchant towns, where the clink of coins and the chatter of traders filled the day. This was a place of raw survival, where the rhythm of life was dictated by the turning of the seasons, planting rice in the muddy spring, harvesting sparse yields in the fall, and enduring winters that gnawed at the bones with cold and hunger. The villagers in this forgotten corner of the mountains lived on the edge of existence, their hands rough from tilling thin, rocky soil, their faces etched with the quiet despair of those who knew the harvest might not last. The air tasted of ash from small cooking fires, mingled with the faint sweetness of boiled millet, and the sourness of unwashed bodies huddled in straw-roofed huts. Lanterns flickered in doorways, their light too weak to push back the creeping dark, casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Can you imagine the weight of that air, the way it pressed against your chest, thick with the promise of a storm and the acrid tang of fear? This was a place where every creak of a floorboard, every rustle in the underbrush could mean danger. The villagers whispered of an Oni, a demon of wrath and chaos that had haunted their valley for years. It wasn't a tale to quiet restless children. It was a truth that clung to their lives like damp cloth, draining their strength, their will, their very essence. Those it touched withered, their eyes hollow, their spirits fading like smoke on the wind. The Oni was no mere ghost story. It was a presence, a shadow that lingered in the corners of their vision, a weight that pressed down on their dreams. Into this world stepped a man named Miyamoto Musashi, a wanderer whose name carried the weight of legend, though he bore it with the ease of a man who had long since made peace with his own myth. His sandals crunched softly on the forest path, the sound swallowed by the murmur of leaves and the distant rush of a stream. His two swords, one long katana, one short wakizashi, hung at his side, their scabbards worn smooth by years of travel, their blades silent but ever ready. His face was weathered, not by age but by the countless duels, the endless roads, the moments of stillness between life and death. His eyes were sharp, searching, as if they could pierce the veil between this world and the next, and his movements carried a quiet grace, each step deliberate, each breath a meditation. Musashi paused at the edge of the village, where the trees parted to reveal a cluster of huts huddled around a muddy clearing. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and straw, the faint cloying sweetness of overripe fruit left to rot in the fields. A child's cry broke the silence, quickly hushed by a mother's weary voice, the sound muffled by the walls of a sagging hut. The villagers moved like shadows, their eyes darting toward the stranger, their hands clutching tools or tattered cloaks. Musashi stood still, his presence calm in the storm of their fear, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his katana, not a threat but a promise of something they could scarcely name. "Who is he?" a voice whispered from a doorway, barely audible over the chirping of crickets that filled the evening air. "The swordsman," another answered, the word heavy with hope and dread, like a stone dropped into a still pond. Musashi's lips twitched, not quite a smile. He had heard such whispers before, in villages scattered across Japan, in the wake of battles that left blood on the earth and questions in his heart. He was no hero, no saviour sent by the gods. He was a man who walked his path, guided by a philosophy he was still forging, a code of balance, of self-control, of meeting chaos with clarity. But tonight, that path had led him here, to a place where the stars hid their light behind a veil of clouds, and the air tasted of fear. An old woman approached, her back bent like a willow branch under the weight of years, her footsteps slow but steady on the uneven ground. Her hands were gnarled, her fingers knotted like the roots of an ancient tree, but her eyes held a fire that age could not dim. "You are Musashi," she said, her voice steady, like the slow drip of water on a stone. "The one who fights with two swords, the one who fears no man." Musashi inclined his head, his voice low and calm, like the ripple of a stream over smooth pebbles. "I am Musashi, but I fear many things, grandmother. Only a fool fears nothing." The old woman studied him, her gaze sharp despite the cloudiness of her eyes, as if she could see the man beneath the legend. "Then you are wise as well as strong. Good. You will need both to face what haunts us." She led him to the centre of the village, where a small crowd had gathered around a fire, its flames casting flickering shadows on their gaunt faces. The air was thick with the smell of burning pine, the faint bitterness of smoke mingling with the earthy scent of damp straw. The villagers stood in a loose circle, their clothes patched and faded, their eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. Musashi stood among them, his presence both a comfort and a challenge. They needed him, but they did not trust him, not yet. Their hands fidgeted, clutching at the edges of their robes or the handles of worn tools, as if seeking something solid in a world that felt like it was slipping away. "Tell me of this Oni," Musashi said, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade through silk, soft but unyielding. The villagers exchanged glances as if speaking the creature's name might summon it from the shadows. A man stepped forward, his hands calloused from years of wielding a hoe, his face lined with worry that seemed etched into his very bones. "It comes at night," he said, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "A shadow, taller than any man, with eyes like burning coals. It takes our strength, our will. Those it touches, they waste away, as if their souls have been stolen." A woman beside him, her hair streaked with grey, clutched a tattered shawl to her chest. "My son," she whispered, her voice breaking. He was strong, full of life. The Oni came, and now he lies in his bed, staring at nothing, his breath shallow, his eyes empty. It takes everything. Musashi listened, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on the fire's glow as it danced and sputtered. He had faced many foes, samurai with flashing blades, bandits with no honour, warlords drunk on power. But this was different. This was no enemy to be cut down with steel. The Oni was a symbol, a manifestation of something deeper, something that gnawed at the edges of his own philosophy. Could a blade defeat a demon? Could a man's will overcome chaos itself? He felt the weight of their eyes on him, the weight of their hope and their fear, and it settled into his chest like a stone. He spoke softly, his words measured, yet they carried the strength of a mountain. I will face this Oni, but I cannot promise victory, only that I will walk the path before me, as I always have." The villagers nodded, some with hope flickering in their eyes, others with resignation, as if they had heard such promises before and seen them crumble. They offered him a bowl of thin porridge, its taste bland but warm, a small gesture of trust in a world where trust was as scarce as a full harvest. Musashi ate slowly, savouring the simplicity, the way the warmth spread through his chest, grounding him in the moment. The night stretched on, the village falling silent save for the distant howl of a wolf and the rustle of leaves in the wind like the breath of the forest itself. Can you imagine living in such a place? The constant edge of fear, the way every shadow seemed to hold a threat. What would you have done, faced with a demon that could not be seen clearly, that fed on the very essence of life? Musashi carried no answers, only questions, and as he settled into the straw mat offered by the villagers, he closed his eyes and let his mind drift, not to the Oni, but to the stillness within himself. The fire's embers glowed faintly, their warmth a fleeting comfort against the cold, and the night wrapped the village in its quiet, watchful embrace. The morning crept into the valley like a cautious guest, its light muted by a shroud of grey clouds that hung low over the mountains. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp bite of frost and the faint green scent of bruised ferns trampled underfoot. Miyamoto Musashi stood at the edge of the village, where the muddy path gave way to the dense embrace of the forest. His breath formed faint wisps in the chill, curling upward like spirits seeking the sky. The village behind him was stirring now, the soft clatter of wooden buckets and the low murmur of voices weaving through the dawn. The scent of steaming rice drifted from a nearby hut, its warmth a fragile counterpoint to the cold that seeped into the bones. Musashi adjusted the weight of his swords, the katana and wakizashi resting against his hip, their presence as familiar as his own heartbeat. His robes, patched and faded from years of travel, brushed against his legs as he stepped into the forest, the ground soft and yielding beneath his sandals. The trees loomed tall, their bark rough and damp under his fingertips, their branches whispering secrets in a language only the wind understood. The air here was different, thicker, heavier, with a metallic tang that lingered on the tongue, like the memory of blood. This was no place for the grand duels of samurai law, no open field where honour was measured in the clash of steel. This was a labyrinth of shadows where the world seemed to blur at the edges, where reality and nightmare danced a delicate waltz. Can you picture the stillness of that forest? The way the air felt alive, pressing against your skin, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and the distant drip of water from unseen streams. What would it feel like to walk into such a place, knowing a demon waited somewhere in its depths? Musashi moved forward, his senses sharp, his mind quiet. He had faced death many times, on battlefields, in duels under moonlit skies. But this was different. The Oni was not a man, not a foe to be met with a blade. It was chaos itself, a force that fed on fear, and Musashi knew that to face it, he would need more than skill. He would need clarity, the kind that came from standing still in the storm. The forest grew denser, the light dimming as the canopy closed overhead. The scent of pine gave way to something darker. Charred wood, wet stone, a faint whiff of decay that clung to the back of the throat. Musashi paused by a narrow stream, its water so clear it seemed to hold the sky in its depths. He knelt, cupping his hands to drink, the cold biting at his lips, sharp and clean. The sound of the stream was a soft murmur, a constant thread weaving through the silence, grounding him in the moment. He closed his eyes, letting his breath slow, letting the world fall away until there was only the rhythm of his heart and the flow of the water. His philosophy was one of balance, of meeting the chaos of the world with a stillness within. If the Oni was a storm, he would be the stone that stood unmoved. A low growl broke the silence, a sound that seemed to rise from the earth itself, vibrating through the soles of his feet. The air grew heavy, oppressive, the scent of decay sharpening into something acrid, like burned hair and sulphur. Musashi rose, his hand resting lightly on his katana, but he did not draw it. His eyes scanned the trees, their trunks cloaked in mist, their branches swaying as if stirred by an unseen hand. The growl came again, closer now, and with it a shadow, massive, hulking, moving with a fluidity that belied its size. The forest seemed to shrink around it, the air pulsing with a strange energy that pressed against Musashi's chest, tugging at his thoughts like fingers prying at a locked door. The Oni emerged from the mist, its form a nightmare given shape. It was taller than any man, its body a mass of muscle and shadow, its skin like blackened iron, rippling with an unnatural sheen. Its eyes burned with a red glow, like embers in a dying fire, and its breath was a rasp, like the scrape of stone on stone. Claws gleamed at its fingertips, sharp enough to rend flesh from bone, and yet it stood still, watching Musashi with a gaze that was both predatory and curious. "You are the one they send," the Oni said, its voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the roots of the trees. "A man with swords. Do you think steel can cut me?" Musashi met its gaze, his own eyes calm, unyielding, like a lake reflecting the storm above. "I do not seek to cut you," he said, his voice steady, soft as the stream's murmur. "I seek to know you." The Oni's laughter was a thunderclap echoing through the forest, sending a flock of crows scattering into the sky. "Know me," it said, its voice dripping with mockery. "I am wrathful. I am chaos. I am the hunger that devours all. There is nothing to know, swordsman. Only surrender." Musashi took a step closer, his sandals sinking into the moss, the dampness seeping through to his skin. "Then why do you stay here?" he asked, his tone measured, like a man testing the weight of a stone. "If you are chaos, why linger in this valley feeding on these people? Why not move as the wind does, wild and free?" The Oni's eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, Musashi saw something flicker in them. Not rage, but something deeper, something raw. "They feed me," it said, its voice softer now, almost a hiss. "Their fear is sweet, their despair sweeter. It fills me, swordsman. It makes me whole." Musashi nodded, as if the creature's words were a piece of a puzzle he was beginning to understand. "And yet you speak to me," he said. "You do not strike. You stand and answer my questions. Why?" The Oni's form seemed to shimmer, its edges fraying like smoke caught in a breeze. "Because you do not tremble," it said, its voice carrying a note of grudging respect. "You do not run, you stand and you question. That is different." Musashi's lips curved into a faint smile, the kind that held no pride, only acknowledgement. "To question is to seek truth," he said, "and truth is the blade that cuts through fear." The Oni snarled, its claws flexing, but it did not move. The air between them crackled, thick with tension, the forest holding its breath. Musashi felt the weight of the moment, the delicate balance between man and demon, between chaos and calm. This was no duel of swords, but a duel of wills, and he knew that to falter was to invite the darkness in. He stood still, his breath even, his heart a steady drum against the chaos of the Oni's presence. What would you have done standing before such a creature? Could you hold your gaze steady, feel the air heavy with its malice, and still speak with calm? The forest was a living thing, its silence a canvas for the tension that hung between them, its scents and sounds wrapping around you like a dream. Musashi stood, not as a warrior, but as a man seeking understanding, and the trees seemed to lean closer, listening. Back in the village, the day unfolded in a rhythm of survival. The air was filled with the soft thud of hoes against the earth, the creak of wooden carts, the faint clinking of clay pots as women prepared meals over small fires. The scent of boiling roots mingled with the smoky tang of burning wood, a reminder of the villagers' resilience despite their fear. Musashi returned as the sun dipped low, its light painting the rice paddies in shades of gold and shadow. The villagers gathered around him, their faces a mix of hope and skepticism, their eyes searching for answers. A young man, barely past boyhood, approached, his hands trembling as he clutched a worn straw hat. "Did you see it?" he asked, his voice low, as if afraid the words might carry to the forest. "Did you see the Oni?" Musashi nodded, his expression calm but not dismissive. "I saw it," he said, "and I spoke with it." The villagers gasped, their murmurs rising like the hum of insects at dusk. "Spoke with it?" the young man said, his eyes wide. "How can you speak with a demon?" Musashi looked at him, his gaze steady, grounding. "It is not so different from speaking with a man," he said. "It has a voice, a will. It chooses its actions just as we do." The old woman who had first greeted him stepped forward, her voice sharp despite her frailty. And Musashi considered her question, his eyes drifting to the fire, its flames casting shadows that dance like memories. "It wants your fear," he said. "It grows strong on your despair. It is not a beast to be slain with a sword, but a shadow to be faced with courage." The villagers fell silent, their faces a tapestry of doubt and hope. A woman, her hands rough from weaving, spoke softly. "How do we face such a thing? We are not like you. We are not warriors." Musashi's gaze softened, and he knelt by the fire, the warmth brushing against his skin. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is the choice to stand, to breathe, to live despite it. You have that strength. You have always had it." The villagers exchanged glances, some nodding, others looking away, their doubts as heavy as the clouds above. Musashi rose, his presence a quiet anchor in their storm. He accepted a cup of weak tea, its bitter taste a reminder of the village's meagre stores, and sat with them as the night deepened, sharing stories of survival, of small victories against the weight of their lives. Can you imagine sitting by that fire, the warmth on your face, the scent of tea and smoke in the air? What would it feel like to hear such words, to be told you held strength you could not see? Musashi carried their hope like a fragile flame, and as the stars began to pierce the clouds, he knew the path ahead would test not just him, but all of them. The dawn broke with a hesitant light, as if the sun itself were reluctant to face the day. The air in the mountain valley was sharp with the scent of frost-kissed leaves and the faint, earthy musk of soil turned by the villagers' hoes. Miyamoto Musashi stood at the edge of the forest, where the village's muddy paths faded into the shadow of ancient pines. His robes, worn thin by years of wandering, clung to his skin, damp from the morning mist that curled like a lover's whisper around the trees. The distant clatter of a wooden bucket echoed from the village, mingled with the soft, rhythmic thud of a mallet shaping straw into rope. The air tasted faintly of charcoal, a reminder of the small fires that had burned through the night, their embers now cooling in the hearths of sagging huts. Musashi's fingers brushed the hilt of his wakizashi, the shorter of his two swords, its weight a quiet reassurance against the uncertainty of the path ahead. The forest loomed before him, its branches heavy with dew, their tips glistening like tears caught in the pale light. The ground was slick, each step a careful negotiation with the earth, the moss soft and yielding under his sandals. This was no place for the grand gestures of a samurai's duel, no open plain where honour was measured in blood. This was a realm of whispers and shadows, where the air seemed to hum with secrets, where the boundary between man and myth grew thin. What must it have been like to stand at that threshold, the forest stretching out like an endless scroll, its depths hiding a presence that defied reason? Could you feel the pulse of the earth beneath your feet, the way it seemed to breathe with you, urging you forward even as it warned you to turn back? Musashi moved deeper into the trees, his senses alive to every detail. The faint creak of branches swaying in the breeze, the cool dampness of the air against his cheeks, the bitter tang of sap lingering on his tongue. His philosophy was one of balance, of finding stillness in the chaos of the world, and he carried that stillness with him now, a shield against the unknown. The forest grew darker, the light filtering through the canopy in thin, wavering shafts, like the glow of lanterns seen through a storm. The scent of pine gave way to something heavier, a cloying mix of wet stone and something acrid, like the aftermath of a fire doused by rain. Musashi's steps slowed, his breath steady, each inhale drawing in the forest's secrets, each exhale a release of the weight he carried. He paused by a gnarled oak, its roots twisting into the earth like the fingers of some ancient guardian. The silence was a living thing, pressing against him, broken only by the faint drip of water from leaves and the distant call of a fox, sharp and fleeting. A sound came then, not a growl but a hum, low and resonant, like the vibration of a temple bell struck in the dead of night. The air thickened, the scent of decay sharpening into something metallic, like blood left to dry on iron. Musashi's hand rested on his katana, but he did not draw it. He stood still, his eyes scanning the mist that clung to the trees, his heart a steady drum against the rising tension. The hum grew louder, and with it came the Oni, its form coalescing from the shadows like ink spreading through water. It was massive, its body a blend of muscle and darkness, its eyes burning with a light that seemed to pull at the edges of Musashi's mind. Its claws gleamed, sharp and cruel, but it did not move, standing as if rooted to the earth, its gaze locked on the swordsman. "You return," the Oni said, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to stir the leaves at Musashi's feet. "Do you seek death? Or do you still believe you can know me?" Musashi's expression remained calm, his eyes steady, like a stone in a rushing river. "I seek neither death nor knowledge alone," he said, his voice soft but unyielding, like the whisper of wind through bamboo. "I seek the truth from you. Why do you linger here, bound to this valley when chaos knows no bounds?" The Oni's eyes flared, and for a moment the air seemed to pulse with its anger, the ground trembling faintly beneath Musashi's feet. "You speak in riddles, swordsman," it said. "I am what I am, wrath, hunger, the end of all things. This valley is mine because they give it to me. Their fear is my strength, their despair my feast." Musashi took a step closer, the moss yielding under his weight, the dampness seeping into his sandals. "And yet you are here, speaking with me," he said. "You could strike, yet you do not. You could flee, yet you stay. What holds you, Oni? What chains you to this place?" The Oni's form shimmered, its edges fraying like smoke caught in a gust. "Chains," it hissed, its voice sharp now, like the crack of a breaking branch. "I am no prisoner. I am the storm that breaks the weak, the fire that consumes the frail. You cannot bind me with words." Musashi's lips curved faintly, not in triumph but in recognition. "Words are not chains," he said. "They are mirrors. They show us what we are, what we might be. You speak of storms, but a storm passes. You speak of fire, but fire burns out. What are you when the fear is gone?" The Oni roared, a sound that shook the trees, sending a cascade of leaves spiraling to the ground. It lunged, its claws raking the air, but Musashi moved with the grace of a leaf on the wind, his body flowing around the attack, his sword untouched. He stood still, his breath even, his eyes locked on the Oni's, and in that moment he saw something flicker in its gaze. Not just rage, but a shadow of something else, something buried deep, like a wound that refused to heal. "You are not merely chaos," Musashi said, his voice a quiet anchor in the storm of the Uni's presence. "You are a choice, a reflection of what these people carry in their hearts, and I will find the truth about you." The Oni snarled, but it did not strike again. It retreated into the mist, its form dissolving like ink in water, leaving behind only the echo of its roar and a faint acrid scent that lingered in the air. Musashi stood alone, the forest settling around him, the hum of its presence fading into silence. He felt the weight of the encounter, not in his body but in his mind, a question that grew heavier with each meeting. What was the Oni truly, and what did it mean to face it? The village was alive with the sounds of labour as Musashi returned, the sun now high, its light breaking through the clouds in thin golden threads. The air was thick with the scent of drying rice and the faint sweet tang of persimmons left to ripen on a wooden rack. Children darted between huts, their laughter a fragile counterpoint to the weariness etched into their parents' faces. Musashi sat by a small fire, its warmth brushing against his skin, the smoke curling upward like a prayer. The villagers gathered, their eyes cautious but curious, drawn to the man who had faced the Oni and returned. A young girl, her hair tied with a frayed ribbon, approached, clutching a small bundle of wildflowers. "Did you fight it?" she asked, her voice soft but clear, like a bell ringing in the quiet. Musashi looked at her, his gaze gentle, like the touch of a breeze. "I did not fight," he said. "I spoke. Sometimes words are sharper than blades." The girl tilted her head, her eyes wide. "But how do words stop a demon?" Musashi smiled, a rare warmth softening his features. "Words do not stop it," he said. "They show it what it is, and sometimes that is enough to change it." An older man, his hands scarred from years of toil, scoffed softly. "Words cannot fill empty bellies or bring back the ones we've lost," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of grief. "What good is talking to a monster?" Musashi met his gaze, his expression steady but not dismissive. "The Oni feeds on your despair," he said. "It grows strong when you surrender to it. But when you stand, when you breathe, when you choose to live despite it, that is a strength no monster can take." The villagers murmured, some nodding, others looking away, their doubts a heavy cloak they could not yet shed. Musashi taught them that evening, not with swords but with breath, showing them how to stand firm, to feel the earth beneath their feet, to let their fears pass like clouds across the sky. It was a small step, a seed planted in rocky soil, but he saw the flicker of something new in their eyes, a spark of defiance, faint but growing. Picture yourself in that village, the fire's warmth on your hands, the scent of smoke and rice in the air. What would it mean to find courage in a world that seemed to offer none? Musashi carried their spark with him, a quiet flame against the darkness, as he turned his gaze back to the forest, where the Oni waited. The twilight settled over the valley like a heavy silk, its edges tinged with the faint glow of a sun that had already slipped behind the mountains. The air carried the crisp scent of pine resin and the faint sweet decay of fallen leaves, layered with the distant smoke of the village's evening fires. Miyamoto Musashi stood at the threshold of the forest, where the last of the village's rice paddies gave way to a tangle of roots and shadows. His sandals were caked with mud, the dampness seeping into his feet, grounding him in the earth's quiet pulse. The sound of a lone flute drifted from the village, its notes fragile and haunting, weaving through the soft rustle of leaves and the faint gurgle of a nearby stream. The air tasted sharp like the first bite of a green plum, a reminder of the world's raw edges. This was no Japan of polished samurai courts or bustling trade routes, where lanterns glowed in neat rows and the clink of sake cups filled the night. This was a place where survival was a daily negotiation, where the villagers' hands bore the scars of resting life from thin soil, where every breath was a defiance of the cold, the hunger, and the fear that lingered like a guest who would not leave. The forest stretched before Musashi, its depths a tapestry of shadow and mist, its silence a weight that pressed against the chest. His swords hung at his side, their scabbards worn smooth by years of wandering, their blades silent but ever present, like the thoughts he carried but did not speak. Musashi stepped into the forest, his movements deliberate, each footfall a soft crunch against the carpet of pine needles and moss. The air grew cooler, heavier, the scent of earth giving way to something sharper, a faint acrid tang, like iron left to rust in the rain. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches interlocking like the ribs of some ancient beast, their bark rough and damp under his fingers as he brushed past. This was a place where the world felt alive, watchful, its pulse beating in the drip of dew from leaves, the faint scurry of a fox in the underbrush, the whisper of wind that carried secrets older than the mountains themselves. What would it mean to walk such a path, to feel the forest's gaze upon you, its silence both a comfort and a challenge? Could you sense the weight of unseen eyes, the way the air seemed to hum with a presence just beyond your reach? Musashi moved deeper, his breath a steady rhythm, his mind a still pool reflecting the chaos around him. His philosophy was one of balance, of meeting the storm with calm, of finding strength in the spaces between action and inaction. The Oni was not just a creature, he knew. It was a question, a mirror held up to the heart of the valley, to the heart of the man who faced it. The forest darkened, the light fading to a soft grey haze, the mist curling around the trees like a lover's embrace. The scent shifted again, the rust-like tang growing stronger, mingled with a faint sour bitterness, like milk left to curdle. Musashi paused by a clearing, where the ground was scarred with deep gouges, as if claws had torn at the earth in rage. The air here was thick, oppressive, pressing against his skin like a damp cloth. He stood still, his hand resting lightly on his katana, not out of fear but out of habit, a gesture as natural as breathing. The silence was broken by a low, resonant hum, like the echo of a gong struck far away, its vibrations stirring the leaves at his feet. The Oni appeared, not with a roar but with a slow, deliberate unfolding, its form rising from the mist like a wave breaking against the shore. Its body was a mass of shadow and sinew, its skin like blackened stone, its eyes glowing with a fire that seemed to burn from within. Its claws gleamed, sharp and cruel, but it stood still, its gaze fixed on Musashi, a mixture of menace and curiosity in its burning eyes. The air pulsed with its presence, a pressure that tugged at the edges of Musashi's thoughts, like a tide pulling at the shore. "You come again," the Oni said, its voice a deep growl that seemed to ripple through the ground. "Do you tire of life, swordsman, or do you seek something you cannot name?" Musashi met its gaze, his eyes calm, like the surface of a lake undisturbed by the wind. "I seek the truth of you," he said, his voice soft but unyielding, like the steady drip of water carving stone. "You are no mere beast. You speak, you think, you choose. What are you, Oni, beyond the fear you feed upon?" The Oni's laughter was a low rumbling thunder, shaking the branches above, sending a cascade of dew to the ground. "I am the end of hope," it said. "I am the weight of despair, the hunger that consumes all. You cannot name me swordsman, for I am what lies within every heart." Musashi took a step closer, the ground soft beneath his sandals, the air cool against his skin. "And yet you are bound to this place," he said. "If you are despair, why do you not spread like a plague? If you are hunger, why do you linger in this valley? What holds you here, Oni?" The Oni's eyes flared, and for a moment the air seemed to crackle, the mist swirling around it like a storm. "You dare question me," it hissed, its claws flexing, the ground trembling faintly beneath its weight. "I am the shadow that grows in the absence of light. I am the silence that follows a scream. I am here because they give me life." Musashi's expression remained steady, his voice a quiet thread weaving through the Oni's storm. "They give you life because they fear you," he said. "But what happens when they fear you no longer? What are you then? You no longer. What are you then?" The Oni snarled, its form shimmering, as if its edges were fraying into the mist. It lunged, its claws slicing through the air, but Musashi moved with the grace of a river, his body flowing around the attack, his swords untouched. He stood still, his breath even, his eyes locked on the Oni's, and in that moment he saw something flicker in its gaze, a shadow of doubt, a crack in its certainty. "You are not eternal," Musashi said, his voice a calm anchor in the chaos. "You are a choice, a reflection of what we carry within us, and I will see you clearly." The Oni roared, a sound that tore through the forest, sending birds scattering into the sky. But it did not strike again. It retreated into the mist, its form dissolving like smoke, leaving behind only the echo of its rage and a faint acrid scent that clung to the air. Musashi stood alone, the clearing silent, the scars in the earth a reminder of the encounter. He felt the weight of the moment, not in his body but in his spirit, a question that grew sharper with each meeting. What was the Oni truly? And what did it mean to face it without a blade? The village was quiet as Musashi returned, the night settling over the valley like a soft blanket. The air was thick with the scent of cooling earth, and the faint, sweet smoke of cedar burning in small hearths. The villagers gathered around a communal fire, their faces illuminated by its glow, their eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and hesitation. Musashi sat among them, his presence a quiet strength. The warmth of the fire brushing against his hands, the scent of roasted yams filling the air with a fleeting comfort. A young woman, her hands rough from weaving straw, spoke softly, her voice trembling but resolute. "You've seen it again," she said. Does it fear you?" Musashi looked at her, his gaze gentle, like the touch of moonlight on water. "It does not fear me," he said, "but it listens, and that is a beginning." An older man, his face weathered by years of toil, leaned forward, his voice heavy with doubt. "A beginning of what? We cannot fight a demon with words. We need it gone." Musashi nodded, his expression calm but not dismissive. "Words are not the end," he said. "They are the path. The Oni grows strong on your fear, but it weakens when you face it. You have that strength, even if you do not yet see it." The villagers murmured, some nodding, others clutching their robes, their doubts a heavy weight. Musashi taught them that night, not with lessons of war, but with lessons of breath, showing them how to stand tall, to feel the ground beneath them, to let their fears flow like water through their fingers. It was a small step, but he saw the change. A spark in their eyes, a slight straightening of their shoulders, a quiet defiance that had not been there before. Feel the warmth of that fire, the way it pushes back the cold, the way the voices around it weave a fragile thread of hope. What would it mean to find strength in such a moment, to stand against a shadow that seemed too vast to overcome? Musashi carried their resolve with him, a quiet ember in his heart, as he looked toward the forest, where the Oni's shadow still lingered, waiting for the next step in their dance. The night draped itself over the valley like a velvet shroud, heavy and soft, its edges pierced by the faint silver of a crescent moon. The air was cool, carrying the sharp scent of cedar smoke from the village fires, mingled with the faint earthy sweetness of damp moss and the distant tang of river water rushing over stones. Miyamoto Musashi stood at the forest's edge, where the last of the village's lantern light faded into the darkness of the trees. His robes, patched and worn, clung to his frame, the fabric cool against his skin from the evening's dew. The distant hum of a bamboo flute wove through the silence, its notes fragile, like a thread stretched taut across the night. The ground beneath his sandals was soft, yielding, each step releasing a faint whiff of crushed herbs and wet earth, a reminder of the valley's quiet, stubborn life. This was no Japan of grand castles or polished swords glinting in ceremonial halls. This was a place where survival was a daily act of defiance, where the villagers' hands bled from wrestling rice from rocky soil, where their voices carried the weight of prayers unanswered by silent gods. The forest loomed before Musashi, its branches a tangled lattice against the sky, their shadows shifting like whispers of forgotten spirits. The air tasted faintly of iron, as if the earth itself bore the memory of blood, and the silence was a living thing pressing against his chest, urging him forward into the unknown. What would it feel like to stand at such a crossroads, the night stretching out before you, its secrets hidden in the rustle of leaves and the flicker of moonlight? Could you hold your heart steady, knowing the path led to a presence that fed on fear itself? Musashi moved into the forest, his steps measured, his breath a quiet rhythm that anchored him to the moment. His swords hung at his side, their scabbards worn smooth by years of wandering, their blades silent but ever present, like the questions he carried in his heart. His philosophy was one of balance, of meeting chaos with clarity, and he carried that clarity now, a lantern against the darkness of the Oni's domain. The forest deepened, its canopy closing overhead, the moonlight reduced to thin slivers that danced on the ground like scattered coins. The air grew heavier, the scent of earth giving way to something darker, a bitter, acrid tang, like charcoal smouldering in the rain. Musashi's senses sharpened, each sound a note in the forest's quiet symphony. The soft creak of a branch bending under its own weight, the faint scuttle of a beetle in the underbrush, the distant hoot of an owl cutting through the night. He paused by a rocky outcrop, its surface slick with moss, its edges worn smooth by centuries of wind and water. The air here was thick, oppressive, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. A low hum rose, not from the ground but from the air itself, a vibration that seemed to pulse through the trees, stirring the leaves into a restless dance. The scent sharpened, the acrid tang now laced with something metallic, like a blade left to rust. Musashi stood still, his hand resting lightly on his katana, not out of fear but out of instinct, a gesture as natural as the rise and fall of his chest. The hum grew louder, and with it came the Oni, its form emerging from the mist like a storm cloud taking shape. Its body was a mass of shadow and muscle, its skin like blackened iron, its eyes burning with a light that seemed to pull at the edges of Musashi's mind. Its claws gleamed, sharp and cruel, but it stood still, its gaze fixed on the swordsman, a mixture of rage and something deeper, something almost human, flickering in its fiery eyes. "You return yet again," the Oni said, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to shake the roots of the earth. "Do you seek to unravel me, swordsman, or do you merely delay your own end?" Musashi met its gaze, his eyes calm like a still pond reflecting the storm above. "I seek neither your end nor mine," he said, his voice soft but unyielding, like the steady flow of a river over stone. "I seek the heart of you. You're not merely chaos, Oni. You are bound to this valley, to these people. Why?" The Oni's laughter was a low guttural roar, sending a shiver through the trees, a cascade of leaves falling like silent rain. "Bound," it said, its voice sharp like the crack of a whip. "I am no prisoner. I am the hunger that consumes, the wrath that breaks. This valley is mine because they offer it to me. Their fear, their despair, their surrender." Musashi took a step closer, the ground soft beneath his sandals, the dampness seeping into his feet. "And yet you remain," he said, his tone measured, like a man weighing a stone in his hand. "If you are hungry, why do you not consume it all and move on? If you are wrath, why do you linger in these shadows? What holds you here, Oni?" The Oni's eyes flared, and the air crackled, the mist swirling around it like a storm. "You speak as if you can see me," it hissed, its claws flexing, the ground trembling faintly beneath its weight. "But you see nothing. I am the darkness in their hearts, the weight of their failures. I am what they cannot escape." Musashi's expression remained steady, his voice a quiet thread weaving through the Oni storm. "And yet you are here, speaking with me," he said. "You could destroy me, yet you do not. You could flee, yet you stay. I see you, Oni, and I see more than darkness. I see a choice." The Oni roared, a sound that tore through the forest, sending a flock of bats scattering into the sky. It lunged, its claws slashing through the air, but Musashi moved with the grace of a leaf on the wind, his body flowing around the attack, his swords untouched. He stood still, his breath even, his eyes locked on the Oni's, and in that moment he saw something shift in its gaze, a flicker of uncertainty, a crack in its certainty, like a stone breaking under the weight of water. "You are not eternal," Musashi said, his voice a calm anchor in the chaos. "You are a reflection, a shadow cast by fear, and I choose to see you clearly." The Oni snarled, its form shimmering as if its edges were fraying into the mist. "You cannot unmake me," it said, its voice softer now, almost a whisper, carrying a note of something raw, something wounded. "I am what they have made me." Musashi nodded, as if the words were a key turning in a lock. "Then they can unmake you," he said, "and I will show them how." The Oni's form wavered, its eyes burning brighter for a moment before dimming, and then it was gone, dissolving into the mist like smoke scattered by the wind. The forest fell silent, the hum fading, the air clearing, leaving only the faint scent of rust and earth. Musashi stood alone, the weight of the encounter settling into his bones, not as fear but as understanding. The Oni was not just a demon, it was a mirror, reflecting the pain and fear of the valley, and to defeat it, he would need to help the villagers face themselves. The village was alive with the soft sounds of morning as Musashi returned, the air filled with the scent of steaming rice and the faint, sweet tang of drying persimmons. The villagers gathered around a small fire, their faces illuminated by its glow, their eyes reflecting a cautious hope. Musashi sat among them, the warmth of the fire brushing against his hands, the smoke curling upward like a prayer. A young boy, his face smudged with dirt, approached, clutching a small wooden carving of a crane. "Will you kill the Oni?" he asked, his voice small but steady, like a pebble dropped into a stream. Musashi looked at him, his gaze gentle, like the touch of dawn on a sleeping valley. "I will not kill it," he said. "I will help you take away its power." The boy tilted his head, his eyes wide. "How do you take power from a demon?" Musashi smiled, a rare warmth softening his features. "By taking back your own," he said. "The Oni grows strong when you fear it, but when you stand, when you breathe, when you choose to live, it weakens." An older woman, her hands rough from years of weaving, spoke up, her voice heavy with doubt but edged with curiosity. "And if we cannot? If we are too weak?" Musashi met her gaze, his expression calm but resolute. "You are not weak," he said. "You have lived through hunger, through cold, through loss. That is strength. You need only to see it." The villagers murmured, some nodding, others clutching their robes, their doubts a heavy weight they were beginning to shed. Musashi taught them that morning, not with swords but with presence, showing them how to stand tall, to feel the earth beneath their feet, to let their fears pass like mist burning away in the sun. It was a small step, but he saw the change, a spark in their eyes, a quiet resolve that grew with each breath they took together. Picture yourself among them, the fire's warmth on your skin, the scent of rice and smoke in the air, the weight of their hope settling into your heart. What would it mean to find strength in such a moment, to stand against a shadow that seemed too vast to overcome? Musashi carried their courage with him, a quiet flame growing brighter as he turned his gaze back to the forest, where the final step in this dance awaited. A faint mist curled through the valley as the sun dipped below the horizon, its last rays painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fading gold. The scent of damp bamboo and roasted barley drifted on the breeze, mingling with the faint mineral sharpness of a nearby spring bubbling over smooth stones. Miyamoto Musashi stood at the village's northern boundary, where the earth sloped upward into a dense thicket of cedar and maple. His robes, frayed at the hems from endless journeys, brushed against his legs, the fabric stiff with the chill of evening. From the village, the soft clink of a blacksmith's hammer rang out, a steady pulse against the hum of cicadas, their song rising and falling like a tide. The air tasted faintly of salt, carried from some distant sea, a reminder of the world beyond the mountains. This was no Japan of lantern-lit festivals or samurai clad in lacquered armour, where honour was measured in polished steel. This was a land of quiet endurance, where villagers carved their lives from rocky fields, their hands rough with calluses, their eyes shadowed by years of meagre harvests and unanswered prayers. The forest before Musashi was a realm of secrets, its branches woven into a tapestry that seemed to pulse with hidden life, its silence a challenge to those who dared enter. His swords rested at his side, their scabbards worn to a soft sheen, their blades quiet but ever ready. Like the thoughts he held close but rarely spoke. Could you sense the weight of such a moment, standing where the known world fades into shadow, where each step feels like a vow to face the unseen? Would you find strength in the silence, or would the forest's whispers stir doubt in your heart? Musashi stepped forward, his sandals sinking into the soft loam, the earth cool and yielding beneath his feet. The air grew sharper, laced with the scent of crushed nettles and a faint, sour bite of decaying wood. The trees parted slightly, their trunks etched with lichen, their leaves trembling in a breeze that carried the distant cry of a heron, sharp and fleeting against the evening's hush. As he ventured deeper, the light dimmed, the sky's glow swallowed by the canopy's embrace, leaving only faint slivers of dusk to guide his path. The forest seemed to breathe, its sounds a delicate weave, the soft patter of a squirrel's claws on bark, the faint rustle of leaves stirred by an unseen hand, the low murmur of a stream hidden in the shadows. Musashi paused beside a jagged boulder, its surface cold and slick under his palm, its edges worn by centuries of rain. The air was heavy now, tinged with a metallic scent, like a blade freshly sharpened, and a faint bitter undertone, as if the earth itself were exhaling its grief. A deep vibration stirred, not from the ground, but from the air, a resonance that seemed to ripple through the trees, making the leaves quiver like a plucked string. The scent grew sharper, the metallic tang now laced with something acrid, like ash scattered on wet stone. Musashi stood firm, his hand grazing the hilt of his wakizashi, not in fear, but in readiness, a gesture as instinctive as the rise of his chest. The vibration intensified, and the Oni emerged, its form coalescing from the mist like a storm taking shape. Its body was a mass of shadow and muscle, its skin like charred stone, its eyes glowing with a fire that seemed to burn through the veil of the world. Its claws gleamed, sharp and menacing, yet it stood still, its gaze locked on Musashi, a flicker of curiosity mingling with its rage. "You dare return," the Oni said, its voice a low growl that seemed to ripple through the earth, stirring the roots beneath Musashi's feet. "Do you think your words can bind me, swordsman, or do you seek to lose yourself in my shadow?" Musashi's eyes held steady, calm as a moonlit pool, reflecting the Oni's fire without wavering. "I seek neither to bind you nor to lose myself," he said, his voice soft but resolute, like the steady drip of water shaping stone. "I seek the root of you. You're no mere demon, Oni. You're tethered to this valley, to its people. What anchors you here?" The Oni's laughter was a deep, rumbling quake, shaking the branches above, sending a scattering of leaves to the ground like falling stars. "Anchored," it said, its voice sharp like the snap of a breaking reed. "I am their fear, their despair, their broken dreams. They feed me, swordsman, and I grow strong on their surrender." Musashi stepped closer, the earth soft and cool beneath his sandals, the air sharp against his skin. "Yet you linger," he said, his tone even, like a man testing the weight of a truth. "If you are their despair, why do you not spread beyond this valley? If you are their fear, why do you answer me? What holds you, Oni?" The Oni's eyes flared, and the air pulsed, the mist swirling around it like a gathering storm. "You speak as if you can see through me," it hissed, its claws twitching, the ground quivering faintly beneath its weight. "I am their pain, their loss, their silence in the face of gods who do not answer. You cannot undo me, swordsman." Musashi's expression remained calm, his voice a quiet current flowing through the Oni's tempest. "I do not seek to undo you," he said. "I seek to show you. You are a mirror, Oni, reflecting what they carry within. And a mirror can be turned to show a different truth." The Oni roared, a sound that split the forest, sending a flock of sparrows scattering into the sky. It lunged, its claws slicing through the air, but Musashi moved with the fluidity of a stream, his body weaving around the attack, his swords untouched. He stood firm, his breath steady, his eyes locked on the Oni's, and in that moment he saw a flicker in its gaze, a shadow of doubt, a fracture in its certainty, like a stone cracking under the weight of time. "You are not eternal," Musashi said, his voice a quiet anchor in the storm's heart. "You are a choice, a shadow born of fear, and I will help them choose differently." The Oni's form flickered, its eyes blazing brighter for a moment before dimming, as if struggling to hold its shape. "You cannot unmake me," it whispered, its voice a low, broken note, like a bell cracked by its own tolling. "I am what they have made me." Musashi nodded, as if the words were a lock clicking open. "Then they can unmake you," he said, "and I will show them how." The Oni's form dissolved into the mist, its presence fading like a storm breaking apart, leaving only a faint, acrid scent lingering in the air. The forest settled, the vibration stilling, the air clearing to reveal the soft glow of dusk. Musashi stood alone, the boulder at his side a silent witness, the weight of the encounter settling into his spirit like a stone sinking into a pond. The Oni was not just a demon, it was a reflection of the valley's pain, and to defeat it, Musashi would need to guide the villagers to face their own shadows. The village glowed faintly in the early morning, the first light casting long shadows across the muddy paths. The air was filled with the scent of drying fish and the faint, sweet warmth of steamed rice, a quiet testament to the villagers' resilience. They gathered near a weathered shrine, its wooden frame moss-covered and worn, the faint chime of a small bell ringing as the wind stirred. Musashi sat among them, the warmth of a small fire brushing against his hands, the smoke curling upward like a prayer to forgotten gods. A young woman, her hands rough from threshing rice, spoke softly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "You face the Oni again," she said. "Is it weaker now?" Musashi looked at her, his gaze gentle, like the first light touching a sleeping field. "It weakens when you refuse it," he said. "Your fear feeds it. Your strength starves it." An older man, his face carved with lines of grief, leaned forward, his voice heavy but curious. "And how do we find that strength? We are not warriors like you." Musashi's expression was calm, his words measured, like stones placed carefully in a stream. "Strength is not in swords," he said. "It is in the choice to rise each day, to plant, to build, to live. You have that strength. You need only to see it." The villagers murmured, some nodding, others gripping their tools, their doubts softening like wax under a flame. Musashi taught them that morning, not with lessons of battle but with lessons of presence, guiding them to stand firm, to feel the earth beneath their feet, to let their fears slip away like leaves on a river. It was a small step, but he saw the change, a spark in their eyes, a quiet resolve taking root. What would it mean to stand in that moment, surrounded by the village's quiet hope, the air alive with the scent of life persisting? Could you find the courage to face your own shadows, to see them not as monsters but as choices you could unmake? Musashi carried their growing strength like a seed in his heart, ready to plant it in the final confrontation where the valley's fate would be decided. The valley stirred beneath a sky heavy with clouds, their edges tinged with the faint silver of a moon struggling to break through. The air carried the crisp scent of wild mint trampled underfoot, woven with the faint smoky warmth of embers glowing in the village below. Miyamoto Musashi stood at the crest of a low hill, where the earth sloped into a dense grove of bamboo and cedar, their silhouettes sharp against the twilight. His sandals pressed into the cool, loamy soil, the faint grit of sand clinging to his soles, grounding him in the moment. From the village, the soft clatter of wooden shutters being drawn mingled with the low hum of a mother's lullaby, its melody fragile but persistent, like a candle flickering in a storm. The air tasted faintly of dew, cool and clean, with a hint of charcoal from fires that had burned through the day. This was no Japan of gilded palaces or bustling market streets, where merchants' laughter and the clink of coins filled the air. This was a place of raw persistence, where villagers coaxed life from stubborn earth, their hands scarred from years of digging, their hearts heavy with prayers whispered to silent shrines. The grove before Musashi was a maze of whispers, its stalks swaying gently, their leaves brushing together with a sound like paper rustling in a scholar's hands. His swords rested at his hip, their scabbards polished by time, their blades quiet but ever present, like the truths he carried but rarely spoke. What would it be like to stand on such a hill, the world hushed around you, the weight of a final challenge pressing against your heart? Could you find the resolve to face a shadow that seemed to know your every doubt? Musashi descended into the groove, his steps silent, each movement a careful dance with the earth. The air grew sharper, laced with the scent of sap and the faint bitter edge of rotting wood, like a memory of forgotten seasons. The bamboo parted around him, their stalks cool and smooth under his fingers, their tips bending in a breeze that carried the distant call of a nightjar, its cry sharp and fleeting like a warning swallowed by the dusk. The grove opened into a clearing where the ground was bare, the earth packed hard as if trodden by countless unseen feet. The air was heavy, tinged with a metallic scent, like a blade left in the rain, and a faint sour undertone, as if the earth itself were exhaling its pain. Musashi stood at the clearing centre, his breath slow and even, his senses alive to every detail. The soft creak of bamboo bending in the wind, the faint rustle of a fox slipping through the undergrowth, the low murmur of a hidden spring. The silence was a weight, pressing against his chest, but he stood firm, his hand grazing his katana, not in fear but in readiness, a gesture as natural as the rise and fall of his breath. A deep pulse stirred, not from the earth, but from the air, a vibration that seemed to weave through the bamboo, making their leaves tremble like a plucked string. The scent sharpened, the metallic tang now laced with something acrid, like ash scattered on wet stone. Musashi stood still, his eyes scanning the shadows, his heart a steady drum against the rising tension. The pulse grew stronger, and the Oni appeared, its form rising from the mist like a wave breaking against a cliff. Its body was a mass of shadow and sinew, its skin like charred iron, its eyes burning with a fire that seemed to pull at the edges of Musashi's mind. Its claws gleamed, sharp and cruel, but it stood still, its gaze locked on the swordsman, a flicker of something new in its fiery eyes, not just rage, but a shadow of recognition, like a wound laid bare. "You come to face me one last time," the Oni said, its voice a low rumble that seemed to stir the earth beneath Musashi's feet. "Do you think your words can break me, swordsman, or do you seek to shatter yourself against my truth?" Musashi's eyes held steady, calm as a moonlit stream, reflecting the Oni's fire without faltering. "I seek neither to break you nor myself," he said, his voice soft but resolute, like the steady rhythm of a temple bell. "I seek to see you clearly. You're no mere demon, Oni. You're a choice, a shadow, born of this valley's pain. Why do you cling to it?" The Oni's laughter was a deep, resonant quake, shaking the bamboo around them, sending a scattering of leaves to the ground like falling ash. "Cling?" it said, its voice sharp like the snap of a breaking twig. "I am their fear, their despair, their surrender. They give me life, swordsman, and I feed on their weakness." Musashi stepped closer, the earth firm beneath his sandals, the air cool against his skin. "Yet you remain here," he said, his tone even like a man testing the weight of a truth. "If you are their despair, why do you not spread beyond this groove? If you are their fear, why do you answer me? What binds you, Oni?" The Oni's eyes flared, and the air pulsed, the mist swirling around it like a gathering storm. "Bind me," it hissed, its claws twitching, the ground quivering faintly beneath its weight. I am their pain, their loss, their silence in the face of gods who turn away. You cannot unravel me, swordsman. Musashi's expression remained calm, his voice a quiet current flowing through the Oni's tempest. I do not seek to unravel you, he said. I seek to show you. You are a mirror, Oni, reflecting what they carry within, and a mirror can be turned to reflect a different truth. The Oni roared, a sound that split the grove, sending a flock of sparrows scattering into the sky. It lunged, its claws slashing through the air, but Musashi moved with the fluidity of a breeze, his body weaving around the attack, his swords untouched. He stood firm, his breath steady, his eyes locked on the Oni's, and in that moment he saw a fracture in its gaze, a flicker of doubt, a crack in its certainty, like a stone breaking under the weight of time. You are not eternal, Musashi said, his voice a quiet anchor in the storm's heart. You are a choice, a shadow born of fear, and I will help them choose differently. The Oni's form flickered, its eyes blazing brighter for a moment before dimming, as if struggling to hold its shape. You cannot unmake me, it whispered, its voice a low, broken note like a bell cracked by its own tolling. I am what they have made me. Musashi nodded, as if the words were a lock clicking open. Then they can unmake you, he said, and I will show them how. The Oni's form dissolved into the mist, its presence fading like a storm breaking apart, leaving only a faint, acrid scent lingering in the air. The grove settled, the pulse stilling, the air clearing to reveal the soft glow of twilight. Musashi stood alone, the bamboo swaying gently around him, the weight of the encounter settling into his spirit like a stone sinking into a still pond. The Oni was not just a demon. It was a reflection of the valley's pain, and to defeat it, Musashi would need to guide the villagers to face their own shadows. The village shimmered in the soft light of dawn, the air alive with the scent of drying herbs and the faint earthy warmth of steamed millet. The villagers gathered near a weathered shrine, its wooden beams etched with prayers, the faint chime of a small bell ringing as the breeze stirred. Musashi sat among them, the warmth of a small fire brushing against his hands, the smoke curling upward like a silent offering. Their faces were no longer just gaunt with fear. There was a spark in their eyes, a quiet strength taking root. A young woman, her hands rough from threshing rice, spoke softly, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. You faced the Oni again, she said. Is it weaker now? Musashi looked at her, his gaze gentle, like the first light touching a sleeping field. It weakens when you refuse it, he said. Your fear feeds it. Your strength starves it. An older man, his face carved with lines of grief, leaned forward, his voice heavy but curious. And how do we find that strength? We are not warriors like you. Musashi's expression was calm, his words measured, like stones placed carefully in a stream. Strength is not in swords, he said. It is in the choice to rise each day, to plant, to build, to live. You have that strength. You need only to see it. The villagers murmured, some nodding, others gripping their tools, their doubts softening like wax under a flame. Musashi taught them that morning, not with lessons of battle, but with lessons of presence, guiding them to stand firm, to feel the earth beneath their feet, to let their fears slip away like leaves on a river. It was a small step, but he saw the change, a spark in their eyes, a quiet resolve taking root. Could you stand in such a circle, the fire's glow warming your skin, the scent of herbs and hope in the air, and feel the weight of your own courage stirring? What would it mean to face a shadow not with a blade, but with the quiet strength of choosing to live? Musashi carried their growing resolve like a flame held against the wind, ready to carry it into the final confrontation where the valley's heart would be reclaimed. The valley lay hushed under a sky strewn with stars, their light sharp and cold like shards of glass scattered across a velvet night. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of freshly turned soil, laced with the subtle sweetness of wild plums ripening on distant branches. Miyamoto Musashi stood at the edge of a rocky ravine where the land dropped sharply into a shadowed expanse of pine and fern. His robes, weathered by countless trails, swayed gently in the breeze, the fabric cool against his skin, carrying the faint dampness of the evening mist. From the village below, the soft rhythm of a wooden pestle grinding millet drifted upward, blending with the faint chirp of crickets, a delicate chorus that seemed to hold the night together. The air tasted clean, with a hint of pine sap, like a promise of renewal after a long winter. This was no Japan of grand dojos or silk-clad nobles, where the clatter of getter sandals echoed on polished wood. This was a place of quiet defiance, where villagers wrested survival from unyielding earth, their hands rough with the labour of planting and reaping, their spirits tempered by years of whispered fears. The ravine before Musashi was a jagged scar in the land, its edges softened by moss and creeping vines, its depths a silent invitation to face what lay hidden. His swords hung at his side, their scabbards worn to a soft sheen by time, their blades quiet but ever present, like the truths he had forged through years of wandering. What does it mean to stand at the edge of such a place, where the stars seem to watch, where the silence holds both threat and promise? Could you hold your heart steady, knowing the final step lies before you? Musashi descended into the ravine, his steps careful, the loose stones shifting under his sandals with a faint clatter. The air grew cooler, sharper, carrying the scent of damp rock and the faint, acrid bite of charred leaves, as if the earth itself bore the memory of a fire long extinguished. The pines loomed tall, their needles brushing against his shoulders, their resinous scent mingling with the faint musk of decaying ferns. The ravine narrowed, its walls closing in, the starlight reduced to faint glimmers that danced on the rocky ground. Musashi's senses were alive, each sound a delicate note in the night symphony. The soft trickle of water seeping through stone, the faint rustle of a badger in the underbrush, the low sigh of wind weaving through the pines. He paused at the heart of the ravine, where a flat stone jutted from the earth like an altar, its surface smooth and cold under his palm. The air was heavy now, tinged with a metallic scent, like iron kissed by rain, and a faint, sour undertone, as if the ravine itself were exhaling its secrets. A deep resonance stirred, not from the ground but from the shadows, a vibration that seemed to pulse through the stones, making the air quiver like a taut bowstring. The scent sharpened, the metallic tang now laced with something bitter, like ash stirred by a storm. Musashi stood firm, his hand grazing his katana, not in fear but in readiness, a gesture as natural as the rhythm of his breath. The resonance grew, and the Oni emerged, its form rising from the shadows like smoke curling from a dying fire. Its body was a mass of shadow and sinew, its skin like blackened stone, its eyes burning with a fire that seemed to pierce the veil of the world. Its claws gleamed, sharp and cruel, but it stood still, its gaze locked on Musashi, a flicker of something new in its fiery eyes, not just rage but a shadow of surrender like a flame guttering in the wind. "You come to end this," the Oni said, its voice a low rumble that seemed to stir the stones beneath Musashi's feet. "Do you think your words can banish me, swordsman, or do you seek to lose yourself in my truth?" Musashi's eyes held steady, calm as a starlit pool, reflecting the Oni's fire without wavering. "I seek neither to banish you nor to lose myself," he said, his voice soft but resolute, like the steady rhythm of a river shaping stone. "I seek to free this valley. You're no mere demon, Oni. You're a choice, a shadow born of their pain. Why do you let it define you?" The Oni's laughter was a deep, resonant quake, shaking the pines around them, sending a scattering of needles to the ground like falling stars. "Define me," it said, its voice sharp like the crack of a breaking stone. "I am their fear, their despair, their surrender. They give me life, swordsman, and I feed on their weakness." Musashi stepped closer, the stones firm beneath his sandals, the air cool against his skin. "Yet you are here, facing me," he said, his tone even, like a man testing the weight of a truth. "If you are in despair, why do you not consume it all and move on? If you are their fear, why do you answer me? What holds you, Oni?" The Oni's eyes flared, and the air pulsed, the shadows swirling around it like a gathering storm. "Hold me!" it hissed, its claws twitching, the ground trembling faintly beneath its weight. "I am their pain, their loss, their silence in the face of gods who turn away. You cannot unmake me, swordsman." Musashi's expression remained calm, his voice a quiet current flowing through the Oni's tempest. "I do not seek to unmake you," he said. "I seek to show them their own strength. You are a mirror, Oni, reflecting what they carry within, and a mirror can be turned to reflect a different truth." The Oni roared, a sound that echoed through the ravine, sending a flock of owls scattering into the sky. It lunged, its claws slashing through the air, but Musashi moved with the fluidity of a stream, his body weaving around the attack, his swords untouched. He stood firm, his breath steady, his eyes locked on the Oni's, and in that moment he saw a fracture in its gaze, a flicker of doubt, a crack in its certainty, like ice breaking under the weight of spring. "You are not eternal," Musashi said, his voice a quiet anchor in the storm's heart. "You are a choice, a shadow born of fear, and they will choose differently." The Oni's form flickered, its eyes blazing brighter for a moment before dimming, as if struggling to hold its shape. "You cannot," it whispered, its voice a low, broken note, like a wind chime cracked by a storm. Then it was gone, dissolving into the shadows like mist burned away by dawn, leaving only a faint, acrid scent lingering in the air. The ravine fell silent, the resonance fading, the air clearing to reveal the soft glow of starlight. Musashi stood alone, the stone at his side a silent witness, the weight of the encounter settling into his spirit like a leaf settling on still water. The Oni was defeated, not by steel but by truth, by the choice to see it clearly, and to help the villagers see themselves. The village woke to a morning bright with promise, the air alive with the scent of fresh straw and the faint sweet warmth of boiling rice. The villagers gathered in the central clearing, their faces no longer shadowed by fear but lit with a quiet resolve. Musashi stood among them, the warmth of the sun brushing against his skin, the faint chime of a temple bell ringing in the distance. Their hands, once trembling, now held tools with purpose, their eyes bright with a strength they had always carried but had not seen. A young boy, his face smudged with dirt, approached, clutching a small woven basket. "Is it gone?" he asked, his voice clear, like a bell ringing in the morning light. Musashi looked at him, his gaze gentle, like the touch of sunlight on a new leaf. "It is gone," he said, "because you chose to stand against it." An older woman, her hands rough from years of weaving, stepped forward, her voice steady but soft. "And if it returns—" Musashi's expression was calm, his words measured, like stones placed carefully in a garden. "It will not return," he said. "Not as long as you choose courage over fear, life over despair. That strength is yours now." The villagers nodded, their murmurs a soft chorus of agreement, their doubts fading like mist under the sun. Musashi stayed a while longer, sharing a meal of rice and dried fish, its taste simple but warm, a testament to their resilience. He taught them to breathe, to stand, to see their own strength, and as he prepared to leave, they pressed a small bundle into his hands, a woven mat, a gift of gratitude, its fibres soft and fragrant with the scent of straw. What does it mean to stand in such a light, where the air hums with hope, where the weight of fear has lifted? Could you carry that strength forward, knowing it was always within you? Musashi walked from the village, his steps light, the ravine and its shadows behind him, the valley blooming with the quiet courage of those who had faced their darkness and chosen light. Morning unfolded across the valley with a gentle hand, its light tracing the contours of the hills in soft strokes of amber and pearl. A breeze carried the clean scent of river water over polished stones, blended with the faint nutty warmth of roasted sesame seeds wafting from the village below. Miyamoto Musashi paused on a weathered stone bridge, its moss-covered arches spanning a narrow stream that gurgled with quiet insistence. His robes, frayed from years of wandering, caught the wind, their threads whispering against his skin like a memory of forgotten roads. From the village, the rhythmic thud of a mallet shaping straw mats echoed, interwoven with the bright laughter of children chasing a stray dog through the lanes. The air tasted crisp, with a trace of wild ginger, sharp and invigorating like a new chapter waiting to be written. This was no Japan of ornate shrines or bustling castle towns, where samurai polished their armour and poets spun verses under lantern light. This was a land of stubborn resilience, where villagers toiled with hands hardened by seasons of labour, their lives a quiet defiance against the weight of hardship. The path beyond the bridge stretched into a rolling meadow, dotted with wildflowers and framed by distant peaks, their slopes softened by a haze of morning mist. Musashi's swords hung at his side, their scabbards worn smooth by countless journeys, their blades silent but ever present, like the truths he had carved from the chaos of his life. What strength lies in leaving a place reborn, where every sound speaks of hope, where the heart finds peace in the act of moving forward? Could you walk such a path, carrying the lessons of courage like a lantern in the dusk? Musashi crossed the bridge, his sandals tapping softly against the stone, each step stirring a faint ripple in the stream below. The air was vibrant, laced with the scent of sun-warmed grass and the faint, earthy musk of clay baked by the rising sun. The meadow opened before him, its grasses swaying in a breeze that carried the distant trill of a skylark, its song bright and fleeting, like a spark against the morning's calm. The path wound through a cluster of low shrubs, their leaves glossy and fragrant, brushing against Musashi's robes as he passed. The light shifted, the sun climbing higher, casting shadows that danced across the ground like ink spilled on parchment. His senses were alive, attuned to the meadow's quiet rhythm, the soft buzz of a bee circling a clover blossom, the faint creak of a cartwheel in the distance, the low murmur of wind weaving through the grasses. He paused by a lone cedar, its trunk gnarled and ancient, its branches heavy with needles that gleamed in the sunlight. The air here was warm, tinged with the scent of resin and the faint bitter edge of dandelion greens, a reminder of the earth's unyielding cycle of growth and decay. Musashi's thoughts turned inward, not to the Oni, now faded like a storm that had passed, but to the valley itself, to the people who had faced their fear and found their strength. The Oni had been a mirror, reflecting the pain and despair of the villagers, but it was their choice to turn that mirror, to see courage instead of fear, that had unmade it. His philosophy, forged in the crucible of duels and solitude, was one of balance, of meeting chaos with clarity, of finding truth in the spaces between action and stillness. The valley had tested that truth, and in its quiet transformation, he saw his own path reflected, a path that led ever onward toward new horizons. The meadow gave way to a gentle rise, where the path climbed toward a ridge overlooking the valley. The air grew lighter, carrying the scent of distant pine forests and the faint, salty tang of a far-off sea. Musashi paused at the ridge's crest, his gaze sweeping across the valley below. The village was a patchwork of straw roofs and green fields, its smoke curling upward like threads of a story finally told. The villagers moved with purpose now, their hands steady as they tended crops, their voices carrying the cadence of hope. The stream glittered in the sunlight, its surface a mirror for the sky, and the hills stood sentinel, their slopes softened by the morning's glow. What does it mean to stand above such a place, to see a world remade by courage, to know your presence helped light the way? Could you carry that light forward, letting it guide you through the unknown? Musashi's hand brushed the hilt of his katana, not in readiness but in reflection, a gesture as natural as breathing. The valley had changed him, as all true battles did, not in the clash of steel, but in the quiet moments of understanding, where the heart finds its own strength. He turned from the ridge, the path stretching before him, leading to new lands, new challenges, new truths to be forged. The village hummed with life as the sun climbed higher, its rays warming the earth, coaxing new shoots from the soil. The air was filled with the scent of drying fish and the faint, sweet warmth of freshly baked rice cakes, a quiet celebration of survival. The villagers gathered in the central clearing, their faces bright with a newfound strength, their hands no longer trembling but steady, holding tools and baskets with purpose. Musashi had left them a gift, not of steel but of presence, a lesson in seeing their own courage. They stood taller now, their eyes reflecting the light of a world no longer shadowed by fear. A young girl, her hair tied with a bright ribbon, ran forward, clutching a small woven charm. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice clear, like a stream bubbling over stones. Musashi knelt to meet her gaze, his eyes gentle, like the warmth of a hearth on a cold night. "I walk where the path leads," he said, "but you carry the strength now. Keep it close, and no shadow will hold you." An older man, his hands rough from years of carving wood, stepped forward, his voice steady but warm. "You've given us more than we can repay," he said, offering a small bundle of dried herbs, their scent sharp and green. "How do we hold on to this?" Musashi's expression was calm, his words measured, like pebbles placed in a quiet pond. "You hold it by living," he said. "Each day you choose to rise, to work, to laugh. That is your strength. The Oni was a shadow, but you are the light." The villagers nodded, their murmurs a soft chorus of gratitude, their doubts replaced by a quiet resolve. They shared a meal with Musashi before his departure, a simple spread of rice, fish, and wild greens, its flavours grounding and warm, a testament to their resilience. As he ate, the children sang a soft tune, their voices weaving through the air like threads of hope, and the adults joined in, their laughter a sound the valley had not heard in years. Musashi rose to leave, the woven charm tucked into his robe, its fibres soft and fragrant with the scent of straw and herbs. The villagers gathered at the edge of the clearing, their faces a tapestry of gratitude and strength, their hands raised in farewell. He walked from the village, the path winding through the meadow, the air alive with the scent of wildflowers and the distant call of a crane, its cry bright against the morning's calm. The valley lay behind him, no longer a place of fear but a beacon of courage, its people a testament to the power of choice. What does it mean to leave a legacy of light? To know your steps have helped others find their way. Could you walk forward, carrying the lessons of this valley, letting them shape the paths yet to come? Musashi's silhouette faded against the horizon, his swords at his side, his heart steady, the valley's courage a quiet flame that would burn within him always, guiding him toward the next dawn. The horizon glowed with the first whispers of dawn, its light threading through distant peaks like a needle stitching sky to earth. A cool wind carried the sharp green scent of bamboo shoots and the faint musky warmth of sun-baked clay, stirring the grasses along a winding trail. Miyamoto Musashi walked steadily, his sandals leaving faint impressions in the dew-damp earth, each step a quiet rhythm against the morning's hush. His robes, worn thin by countless roads, brushed against his legs, their fibres catching the faint warmth of the rising sun. From a distant village, the soft toll of a temple bell rang out, its note clear and fleeting, mingling with the chatter of sparrows flitting through the underbrush. The air tasted of morning mist, crisp and clean, with a trace of wild mint that lingered on the tongue like a half-remembered dream. This was no Japan of polished courts or samurai banners fluttering in the wind, where honour was measured in duels and decrees. This was a land of quiet endurance, where farmers bent over fields, their hands stained with soil, their lives woven from the threads of persistence and hope. The trail stretched before Musashi, cutting through a rolling plain dotted with wildflowers and framed by jagged cliffs, their faces etched with the scars of ancient rains. His swords rested at his hip, their scabbards smoothed by years of travel, their blades silent but ever-present, like the questions that lingered in his heart, sharpened by the valley he had left behind. What does it mean to carry a victory won not with steel but with truth? To walk a path where each step echoes the courage of others? Could you hold such a truth in your heart, letting it guide you through the unknown? Musashi moved forward, his step steady, the earth firm beneath his sandals, its texture rough with scattered pebbles and roots. The air was alive, carrying the scent of blooming heather and the faint, earthy tang of a nearby river cutting through the plain. The cliffs loomed closer, their shadows stretching across the trail, their surfaces cool and rough under his fingers as he brushed past a jagged outcrop. The trail dipped into a shallow valley, where the grasses gave way to a grove of gnarled plum trees, their branches heavy with unripe fruit, their leaves shimmering in the dawn's light. Musashi's senses were sharp, attuned to the world's quiet pulse, the soft hum of bees circling the blossoms, the faint creak of a branch bending under its own weight, the low murmur of wind weaving through the trees. He paused by a small shrine, its wooden frame weathered and grey, adorned with a single rope of twisted straw, its fibres frayed but strong. The air here was warm, tinged with the scent of cedar incense and the faint bitter edge of green plums, a reminder of life's balance between growth and patience. A faint tremor stirred the air, not a sound but a feeling, like the ripple of a stone dropped into a still pond. The scent shifted, the cedar warmth giving way to something sharper, like flint struck against steel, with a trace of damp earth, as if the ground itself were waking. Musashi stood still, his hand resting lightly on his wakizashi, not in fear but in awareness, a gesture as natural as the rise of his chest. The tremor grew, and a presence emerged. Not the Oni, but something new, a shadow that seemed to flicker at the edges of perception, formless yet heavy, like a thought too vast to grasp. It was no demon, but a question, a challenge born of the valley's victory, a whisper of doubt that lingered in the wake of courage. "You walk with purpose," a voice said, low and resonant, not from the air but from within, like a memory stirring in the heart. "But what do you seek, swordsman, now that the shadow is gone?" Musashi's eyes scanned the grove, calm as a still lake, reflecting the world without disturbance. "I seek the path," he said, his voice soft but steady, like the steady beat of a drum in a quiet temple. "The valley taught me that truth is not in victory, but in choice. What are you, shadow, that questions me now?" The presence shimmered, its formless weight pressing against the air, the scent of flint growing stronger, laced with a faint, acrid bite, like a fire doused by rain. "I am the doubt that follows triumph," it said, its voice a low hum, like wind through a hollow reed. "I am the question that lingers when fear is gone. What will you do, swordsman, when there is no enemy to face?" Musashi stepped closer to the shrine, the earth cool beneath his sandals, the air sharp against his skin. "There is always an enemy," he said, his tone even, like a man weighing a truth in his hands. "It is the doubt within, the fear we carry even in victory. I face you as I face the Oni, with clarity, with choice." The presence's laughter was a soft ripple, stirring the leaves above, sending a scattering of petals to the ground like falling snow. "Clarity," it said, its voice sharp like the snap of a breaking twig. "You speak of choice, but what is choice without purpose? The valley is free, but you walk alone. What do you seek, swordsman?" Musashi's expression remained calm, his voice a quiet thread weaving through the presence's challenge. "I seek to live," he said, "to walk, to learn, to meet each moment as it comes. The valley showed me that strength is not in defeating shadows, but in choosing to walk through them. The presence pulsed, its weight softening as if testing his words. "You are not like them," it said, its voice quieter now, like a breeze fading at dusk. "They stay. You wander. Their strength is rooted. Yours is unbound. What will you carry from this place?" Musashi's hand brushed the woven charm tucked into his robe, its fibres soft and fragrant with the scent of straw and herbs. "I carry their courage," he said, "and I carry the truth that every shadow is a choice, every doubt a chance to grow." The presence flickered, its formless weight dissolving like mist under the sun, leaving only a faint, flinty scent lingering in the air. The grove settled, the tremor fading, the air clearing to reveal the soft glow of dawn. Musashi stood alone, the shrine at his side a silent witness, the weight of the encounter settling into his spirit like a pebble sinking into a stream. The valley had given him a truth to carry forward, a lesson in the power of choice, and he would walk with it, as he always had, into the unknown. The village thrived in the light of a new day, its air filled with the scent of fresh straw and the faint, sweet warmth of steaming rice porridge. The villagers gathered in their fields, their hands steady as they planted new seeds, their voices carrying the cadence of hope. Musashi had left them a legacy, not of steel, but of presence, a spark that had kindled their courage into a flame. They worked together now, their laughter mingling with the clatter of tools, their eyes bright with the knowledge that they had faced their fears and chosen life. A young man, his hands rough from tending the fields, approached Musashi before his departure, offering a small wooden carving of a crane. "Will you remember us?" he asked, his voice clear, like a bell ringing in the morning light. Musashi met his gaze, his eyes gentle, like the touch of dawn on a quiet valley. "I will carry you with me," he said. "Your strength is a lesson I will not forget." An older woman, her face lined with years of toil, stepped forward, her voice warm but resolute. "And if doubt returns?" she asked, her hands clutching a woven basket. Musashi's expression was calm, his words measured, like leaves falling on a still pond. "Doubt is a shadow," he said. "Meet it with the same courage you found here. Choose to live, and it will fade." The villagers nodded, their murmurs a soft chorus of gratitude, their resolve a quiet fire that would burn through the seasons. They shared a final meal with Musashi, a simple spread of rice, pickled radish, and dried fish, its flavours grounding and warm, a testament to their new beginning. As he prepared to leave, they pressed a small bundle into his hands, a cloth woven with care, its threads fragrant with the scent of wild herbs, a gift to carry on his journey. What does it mean to walk away from a place where courage has taken root, to carry its lessons into the vast unknown? Could you find the strength to meet each new shadow with the same clarity, knowing it is a choice to be made? Musashi walked from the village, the path stretching before him, the air alive with the scent of wild flowers and the distant call of a crane, its cry bright against the dawn. The valley's courage was a quiet flame in his heart, guiding him toward new horizons, where new truths awaited. A soft glow touched the jagged cliffs, where the first light of morning carved sharp edges against a sky still heavy with night. Dust stirred under Musashi's sandals, mingling with the crisp aroma of wild sage and the distant warmth of smouldering hearth fires from a hamlet nestled in the valley's curve. Miyamoto Musashi stood on a rocky outcrop, gazing across a windswept plain where tall grasses bent in waves, their tips catching the dawn like sparks on a blade. His robes, frayed from countless journeys, moved with the wind, their fibres brushing his skin with a faint tickle, as if whispering tales of paths long walked. From the hamlet below, the steady thump of a water wheel turning in a stream rose, interwoven with the faint laughter of children playing near a wooden gate. The air held a clean, earthy bite, laced with the subtle tang of dew-soaked clover, like a canvas waiting for the day's first stroke. This was no Japan of silk markets or temple bells ringing in orderly rows, where honour was a currency traded in courts. This was a land of quiet tenacity, where villagers shaped their lives from the hard soil, their fingers rough with the labour of planting and mending, their hearts carrying the weight of seasons survived. The plain stretched toward a distant line of hills, their slopes dusted with early frost, the air vibrant with the promise of a journey unfolding. Musashi's swords hung at his side, their scabbards smoothed by years of wandering, their blades silent but ever present, like the truths he sought, tempered by the valley's triumph over its shadow. How does it feel to stand where the world opens wide, where each guest carries the echo of battles won not with steel but with will? Could you trust the path ahead, knowing it was paved by the courage of others? Musashi stepped down from the outcrop, his sandals sinking into the soft earth, each stride a quiet affirmation of purpose. The air was alive, infused with the sharp perfume of crushed thistles and the faint mineral edge of a spring bubbling among the rocks. The plain unfolded before him, its grasses swaying in a gust that bore the distant cry of a kestrel, its call piercing the morning's calm like a needle through silk. The trail wove through a cluster of low, thorny bushes, their leaves brittle and fragrant, grazing Musashi's robes with a faint scratch. The sun rose higher, its warmth piercing the dawn's chill, casting shadows that flickered across the ground like ripples on a quiet stream. His senses were keen, alive to the plain's subtle pulse, the faint buzz of a beetle scuttling over a stone, the soft creak of a pine bending in the distance, the low hum of wind curling through the grasses. He paused beside a weathered stone cairn, its rocks stacked with care, their surfaces etched with faint scratches from passing travellers. The air was warm now, tinged with the dry scent of baked clay and the subtle bitterness of wild sorrel, a testament to life's persistence in unyielding places. A faint tremor brushed the air, not a sound but a sensation, like the ripple of a thought stirring the mind. The scent shifted, the earthy warmth giving way to a colder note, like frost on a blade with a trace of damp lichen, as if the plain itself were pausing to listen. Musashi stood firm, his hand lightly touching his katana's hilt, not in fear but in readiness, a gesture as natural as his steady breath. The tremor deepened, and a figure appeared, not the Oni, but a wanderer, cloaked in robes patched with time, his face lined like the cairn stones, his eyes gleaming with a quiet probing light. He leaned on a staff of twisted oa, its grain worn smooth by countless miles. "You tread a path alone," the wanderer said, his voice low and even, like the murmur of a river over pebbles. "What drives you, swordsman, now that the valley's shadow is no more?" Musashi met his gaze, his eyes steady, like a calm lake mirroring the dawn's glow. "I seek the truth of each step," he said, his voice soft but unyielding, like the steady toll of a village gong. "The valley showed me that courage is a choice, not an end. What are you, wanderer, to question me here?" The wanderer's mouth twitched into a faint smile, his staff tapping the earth with a soft thud. "I am a seeker, like you," he said, his voice carrying a weight, like a stone dropped into still water. "I am the doubt that trails victory, the question that lingers when fear fades. What do you carry from that valley, swordsman?" Musashi stepped closer, the earth solid beneath his sandals, the air cool against his face. "I carry their choice," he said, his tone measured, like Juno a truth in his palm. "The choice to face fear, to live despite it. That truth walks with me. What do you seek, wanderer?" The wanderer's eyes sharpened, the air pulsing faintly, the frosty scent intensifying, tinged with a faint acrid note, like embers long cooled. "I seek your resolve," he said, his voice soft like a whisper in the wind. "You unmade a demon, but what of the doubts within? Can you face them as you face the Oni?" Musashi's expression remained steady, his voice a quiet current through the wanderer's words. "Doubts are shadows," he said. "Like the Oni, they are choices to be met with clarity. The valley taught me to choose life over fear." The wanderer nodded, his staff striking the ground, the sound echoing like a heartbeat. "Then keep walking," he said, his voice fading like a breeze slipping away. "Every path brings new doubts, new truths to face." The wanderer stepped back, his form blending into the morning haze, dissolving like frost under sunlight, leaving only a faint chilly scent behind. The plain grew still, the air clearing, the dawn's glow softening the horizon. Musashi stood alone, the cairn a silent companion, the encounter's weight settling into his spirit like a pebble in a stream. The valley had taught him that courage was a choice, and this wanderer's challenge was another step on that path. A reminder that truth was not a destination, but a journey. The hamlet pulsed with life as the sun climbed, its air rich with the aroma of drying reeds and the warm, sweet tang of roasted chestnuts. Villagers moved through the fields, their hands steady, sowing seeds with a quiet confidence born of shared stories from the valley. Musashi's presence had carried those tales here, a spark of courage that kindled their own. He paused at the hamlet's edge, where a small wooden bridge arched over a trickling brook, its waters catching the sunlight like scattered coins. A young woman, her fingers calloused from spinning thread, offered a bamboo cup of tea, its steam rising in delicate curls. "You come from the valley they speak of," she said, her voice bright like a sparrow's song at dawn. "Is it true they faced a demon?" Musashi nodded, his gaze gentle like the touch of morning light on dew. "They faced their fear," he said, "and found their strength. That strength lies in you too." An older man, his hands scarred from years of toil, approached, his voice warm but curious. "And you, swordsman? What do you take from such a place?" Musashi's expression was calm, his words steady like roots anchoring a tree. "I take their truth," he said. "That courage is a choice made each day. It is a fire that never fades." The villagers murmured, their voices a soft harmony of understanding, their resolve a quiet flame. They shared a meal with Musashi, rice, salted fish, and wild greens, the flavours simple but grounding, a testament to their enduring spirit. As he rose to leave, they handed him a woven cord, its fibres fragrant with dried herbs, a token of their gratitude. How does it feel to walk away from a place touched by courage, knowing your presence helped light their path? Could you let that light guide your own, illuminating the shadows ahead? Musashi crossed the bridge, the plain stretching wide before him, the air alive with the hum of life and the distant call of a kestrel, its cry a sharp note of freedom. The valley's courage burned within him, a steady flame lighting the way toward new truths, new paths, new dawns. Sunlight spilled across the mountain pass, its rays glinting off the dew-soaked rocks like sparks from a flint. The wind wove through the crags, carrying the sharp, resinous tang of pine and the faint warmth of sun-baked lichen. Miyamoto Musashi stood at the pass's summit, his silhouette sharp against the vast sky, where clouds drifted like ink brushed across a scroll. His robes, tattered from endless wanderings, fluttered lightly, their threads catching the light like worn silk. From a distant village nestled in the valley's fold, the faint clang of a copper bell rose, mingling with the soft lowing of oxen trudging through muddy fields. The air was clean, with a crisp bite of mountain frost and a trace of wild thyme, like a breath of clarity after a long night. This was no Japan of grand fortresses or lantern-lit festivals, where honour was a polished blade displayed in courts. This was a land of quiet resolve, where villagers lived by the rhythm of the seasons, their hands hardened by toil, their hearts lifted by the stories of courage that travelled like seeds on the wind. The pass descended into a valley of rolling hills, their slopes cloaked in wild grasses and dotted with ancient stones, their surfaces worn smooth by time. Musashi's swords rested at his hip, their scabbards etched with the marks of countless roads, their blades silent but ever present, like the wisdom he carried, forged in the crucible of choice. What does it mean to stand at the edge of a journey's end, where the world lies open, its challenges as vast as the sky. Could you carry the truth of courage forward, letting it shape the unknown? Musashi began his descent, his sandals gripping the rocky path, each step a quiet pledge to meet the world with clarity. The air was sharp, infused with the scent of crushed ferns and the faint, earthy musk of rain-soaked stone. The valley opened below, its hills rolling gently, the breeze carrying the distant song of a flute, its notes weaving through the air like a thread of light. The path curved through a grove of stunted pines, their needles sharp and fragrant, brushing against Musashi's robes like a gentle challenge. The sun burned away the morning chill, its light casting shadows that danced across the rocks like fleeting thoughts. His senses were alive, attuned to the valley's rhythm, the soft chatter of a squirrel darting through the underbrush, the faint clink of pebbles tumbling down a slope, the low hum of wind slipping through the pines. He paused by a small spring, its waters bubbling over smooth stones, their surfaces gleaming like polished jade. The air was cool here, tinged with the scent of wet rock and the faint bitter tang of wild berries, a reminder of life's balance between sweetness and struggle. The quiet presence stirred, not a tremor but a weight, like the shadow of a thought crossing the mind. The scent shifted, the cool air taking on a metallic edge, like a blade freshly honed, with a trace of damp moss. Musashi stood still, his hand resting lightly on his wakizashi, not in fear but in awareness, a gesture as instinctive as his breath. The presence grew, and an old woman appeared, her back bent like a willow, her robes patched with care, her eyes bright with a wisdom that seemed to pierce the veil of time. She carried a basket woven from reeds, its contents hidden, her steps silent on the rocky path. "You walk with purpose," she said, her voice soft but clear, like the ripple of water over stone. "What calls you forward, swordsman, after the valley's shadow has faded?" Musashi met her gaze, his eyes calm, like a still pool reflecting the sky. "I follow the path of truth," he said, his voice steady like the toll of a distant bell. "The valley taught me that courage is a choice, a fire that burns within. Who are you, elder, to ask me this?" The old woman's smile was faint, her basket shifting in her hands. "I am a watcher," she said, her voice carrying a quiet weight, like a stone smoothed by a river. "I see the choices that shape the world. What do you carry from the valley, swordsman, and where will it lead you?" Musashi stepped closer, the rock steady beneath his sandals, the air cool against his face. "I carry their strength," he said, his tone even, like a man weighing a truth. "The strength to choose life over fear, to face doubt with clarity." "Where does your path lead, elder?" Her eyes gleamed, the air stirring faintly, the metallic scent sharpening, laced with a faint earthy note, like soil after rain. "My path is to ask," she said, her voice soft, like a leaf falling on water. "You faced a demon with words, not steel. But what of the demons within? Can you face them with the same truth?" Musashi's expression remained calm, his voice a quiet thread through her words. "The demons within are choices too," he said. "The valley showed me that truth is in choosing to live, to walk." The old woman nodded, her basket swaying gently, the sound of reeds brushing together like a whisper. "Then your path is true," she said, her voice fading like a breeze slipping through the pines. "Walk it well, swordsman." She stepped back, her form blending into the shadows of the grove, dissolving like mist in the sunlight, leaving only a faint earthy scent behind. The valley grew still, the air clearing, the sun's warmth softening the rocks. Musashi stood alone, the spring's gentle gurgle a quiet companion, the encounter's weight settling into his spirit like a seed taking root. The valley's truth was a fire within him, a choice to face every shadow with courage, to walk the path of life. The village bloomed with the energy of renewal, its air rich with the aroma of fresh straw and the warm, sweet tang of boiling rice. The villagers worked in harmony, their hands steady as they mended roofs and planted fields, their voices carrying the melody of hope. Musashi's journey had left a legacy, a spark of courage that had spread from the valley to this distant place, kindling a fire in their hearts. He stood at the village's edge, where a narrow path led to a bamboo grove, its stalks swaying in the breeze like dancers in the sunlight. A young boy, his hands stained with soil, ran forward, holding a small wooden flute. "They say you helped a valley defeat a demon," he said, his voice bright like a stream sparkling in the sun. "Is it true?" Musashi knelt, his gaze gentle like the warmth of a campfire's glow. "They defeated their fear," he said, "and found their courage. That courage is in you too." An older woman, her hands rough from weaving baskets, approached, her voice warm but steady. "And what of you, traveller? What do you carry from such a journey?" Musashi's expression was calm, his words measured, like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. "I carry the truth of choice," he said. "The choice to live, to face every shadow with strength. That truth is my path." The villagers nodded, their voices a soft chorus of gratitude, their resolve a quiet flame that would burn through the years. They shared a meal with Musashi, millet porridge, dried plums, and salted fish, the flavours simple but nourishing, a reflection of their enduring spirit. As he prepared to leave, they offered a small woven mat, its fibres fragrant with the scent of dried lavender, a gift to carry on his journey. What does it mean to leave behind a world transformed by courage, to walk a path lit by the strength of others? Could you carry that strength into the unknown, letting it guide your heart through every shadow? Musashi walked into the bamboo grove, the path stretching toward the horizon, the air alive with the hum of life and the distant song of a flute, its notes a quiet promise of new beginnings. The valley's legacy was a fire within him, a truth that would light his way through every dawn, every challenge, every choice. That's our tale tonight, listeners. Share your thoughts, your city, your time zone. Are you with Elena in Moscow as the twilight fades, with Hassan in Casablanca under the quiet night sky, with Aiko in Osaka at sunrise, or with Grace in Auckland as dawn colours the sea? Like this episode, subscribe if you love these shadows. Keep your lanterns lit. Rest well until next time.